Good afternoon, John.
Hi, Marty.
It's been a couple of weeks.
It has, yeah.
Good to be back with you.
Yeah.
I was
kind of a mellow, contemplative, kind of really don't have anything to talk about, or anything specific. I got all kinds of things to talk about, and curious and excited where this might go.
yeah. One thing that's I want to just talk to you about and see if it has any legs is I had the opportunity over the last week to, actually a couple weeks, to reread the book that I've written, the book Creating Our World, and at the inspiration of a friend of mine who wants to help me get it published. And so I went through, I hadn't read it since before Christmas, and I went through and continued to catch editorial errors and fixed them and like that. But I was thinking about what I want to do in the future. As you know, I'm going to be stepping down from the pulpit of my church at the end of June, and that's going to be opening up some time. And so I was rereading the chapter that focuses on the collective unconsciousness, or the collective consciousness, or the collective we space.
Mm-hmm.
And I had noted in there this process called Bohmian dialogue, which is, for those of you who haven't heard this, it's a process of learning to experience the group as a singularity rather than as a bunch of individuals. That was developed by the British quantum physicist David Bohm, B-O-H-M, and anybody who's interested in this can just go look him up on the internet. And he developed this process in conjunction with the mystic Krishnamurti. Krishnamurti, again, those of you who don't know, was an Indian citizen who was groomed by the Theosophy Society to be the next guru, the next great guru. And he and Bohm linked up in London in the late 50s, early 60s, and conducted a series of dialogues about the relationship that the quantum physicists saw in the physical world with what the mystics see in the world generally. That is to say, in the seamless unity of all reality that's fragmented by human thinking and human conceptualizing and so forth. And so what he became, Bohm became interested in, well, how can we develop a process by which we can actually experience what's going on between people rather than what's going on in my own individual mind? And so I'm thinking about one of the things I might do after the end of June is to start a Bohmian dialogue group and invite people who might be interested in exploring this experience of what's the consciousness that's uniting us. So, for example, right now, you and I, you're presumably thinking and experiencing through your own sense of being an individual, and I'm doing that. But there's also a field that is containing both of us.
Right.
And there's a field that may actually be giving rise to these, what appears to be separate consciousness. So there's a field of consciousness that is not divisible by two. We're experiencing it as two, as separate, but we're standing on a unified floor of consciousness, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I learned all of this stuff from the Ken Wilber work, and Wilber is positing that the way consciousness develops, it embraces larger and larger senses of identity, who I am. And so what I was thinking is that much of the way that we conduct our accountability practice meetings already establishes the prerequisite for a Bohmian dialogue group. Because the commitment in a Bohmian group is that as individuals, we continually monitor what's rising in our own consciousness, and we are willing to speak that into the collective space. In other words, we're continually working on owning and withdrawing projections.
Mhm.
And so Bohm's theory was that if you have 6 people sitting in a circle, or eight people, and we are all noticing and withdrawing our projections in real time, that's clearing away the projections so that the collective space can presence itself. And so I did some of these practice groups about 15, 20 years ago when I first started researching this stuff. And it was an interesting experience. So I'm thinking about the possibility of inviting those of us that are participating in this work who might feel a little frisky and adventurous about going into some place that might be next in terms of consciousness to check it out.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds it's not interesting. It's so.
Well, I think about I noticed this when I was back in Michigan last week. I was back there for a memorial service for my parents. And after the service on Saturday and after the luncheon that we all participated in, my family got together at one of the in-laws' house, and we sat in a big circle, and there were, I don't know, 18 of us. And there were the children and grandchildren of my parents. And so there were a couple of generations. And we went around the room, and everybody was invited to share a story or an experience or a memory that we had of mom and dad. And it was really fascinating to listen to my nieces and nephews talk about their experience of their grandparents, which of course is utterly different from the experience that I had as a kid. And it's utterly different from the experience that my siblings had of our parents.
Mm-hmm.
And it came up, the kids began to discuss some of the impacts of the alcoholism of our parents on our lives. And the grandkids weren't all that familiar with all this stuff. And so we ended up having this really interesting intergenerational dialogue about the impact of alcoholism on us and how it impacts them. And I was reminded as I sat there of the intergenerational nature of the transmission of trauma. And so how that trauma, so I'm sitting in this room of 18 people to whom I'm related by blood, but I'm also related by this experience, this collective family experience, and thinking to myself, how could we, if we could speak as one voice, if the family voice could speak, how would it talk? What would it say? Who are we as a family, as opposed to 18 separate individual people having 18 supposedly individual experiences? And that's because somehow the way those traumas get transmitted, they're not happening necessarily in the physical realm. There's something that happens in between people that has reality.
Yes.
As a vehicle of generation of these, it's not just the traumas, of course, they're also transmitting the talents and the triumphs and
Mm-hmm.
the passions.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that we're at this point in human history, we really can't measure in the ways that we can measure, H2O,
right,
or electricity. We can't measure it, but we can see its results, and we can know it's there somehow. And so as I sit in accountability groups and I listen to colleagues work on digging deeper into knowing ourselves and knowing the truth, it's really, the deeper I go, the farther back I go, the closer I'm coming to contacting experiences and information that's not mine alone, that somehow belongs to my parents and to their parents and back and back and back. You muted yourself accidentally.
That's my understanding of the subconscious.
Right, exactly.
The subconscious, the work we do in intentional living accountability tree process is to clear out the subconscious so it's not contaminated with unresolved trauma or resentment or energetic marker. And when those are relieved, this connection to our subconscious avails us to, I would say me, my experience of me, because I am connected to that subconscious, is being able to participate in a room without an agenda, without thinking. It's like I enter into the observer position, and I'm engaged in this, I'm going to call it a dance, that's not the right word. I'm engaged in this flow, and I know when to be quiet and sit down, or I know when to emphasize something that was just said or heard, a feeling tone in somebody, to point, to bring attention to that elusive thing that everybody's looking for and is tucked away deep right in the corner of their heart. And yet the way to it is through that trauma. You can call it shadow, darkness, pain. And the mechanism of our survival mechanism actually wants us to leave that pain alone because we survived. So as long as that pain's there, it believes we're going to survive, although it has no access to our sense of desire, comfort, pleasure. It is a survival mechanism. And what I found for me is that the feeling of being alive, no matter how that's expressed, whether it's curiosity or connection, or has become the thing that I'm most terrified of. And therein lies the dilemma. In a remedial story, I was conditioned as a man to, as a human being, stuff my feelings, don't cry, don't be a sissy. And I turned 45 years old, 50 years old, and I go into a therapist's office, and the first question she or he asked is, how are you feeling? Which makes it's like, what does that got to do with anything? And I'm so estranged from my feelings. I wouldn't know a feeling if it hit me in the head, and
which it often does.
Which it often does. So yeah. So, and this concept, this Bohemian, is that way how I would say it?
Bohemian dialogue.
Bohemian dialogue with intent, not knowing. We don't have to know how.
Correct.
That's the understanding. The how is the major block to the experience of it. And see what happens.
Exactly.
An experiment. Take a risk. Be willing to be transparent, or to be vulnerable, or to experiment with other people, where my fear before my recovery was people's judgment of myself, their opinion of me, everything from the outside kept me alert to there instead of this centered place, heart place, what Christ, I believe Christ referred to as the peace beyond all understanding. And what Buddha, I don't know if it was Buddha referred to it as silence, or maybe it was Taoist thing, I'm not sure, but that silent, spacious place inside of me where there's nothing wrong. And there's the zone, the flow, and then to do that on a, see, I think we already do it on a community level. We're already immersed in the community level, not knowing it, thinking that we're separate.
Exactly.
Yes. And then maybe to have a group experience of this flow place and see what happens. So, you know, you asked the question, what would that singular voice say? And I'm thinking it would be a melody. It would be some type of, I don't know.
A symphony.
That's my, yeah.
You said that, as soon as you said that, it made me think maybe that's where music comes from.
Yeah, because music is our interpretation of music and our capacity to form instruments to create music is an imitation of the sound that's already there.
Yeah, and its power may come from that. It comes from that in-between space.
Yes.
So that it has a universal attraction and universal impact that doesn't depend on personal, individualized interpretation. I mean, you can have an interpretation and the whole audience can be moved in the same way.
Right.
By a powerful piece of music.
Yes. There we go.
And that's what I say that because when you said that, you know, it may sound like a harmony or symphony or whatever the word you used was, like, well, yeah, maybe that's true. Maybe that's what, let's go find out.
Yeah.
I mean,
oh yeah. Okay.
Because it's clear that deeper level of consciousness has to be accessible to everyone equally. I mean, it's like because if my individual consciousness or yours arises from this collective, then the collective has to be, it's a universalizing presence. And so, if we're all speaking different languages, then the language that's the universal may not be this verbal thing that may not be English, it may not be Chinese, it may be something like music.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. You know,
well,
go ahead.
And that's related to feeling. It's like
Yes.
Our feelings. I mean, I may be feeling sadness in my individual body as I'm encountering some experience, but the sadness that I feel is universal. I mean, I don't feel different sadness from other people's sadness.
Right.
There's some integrating, universalizing, pulling together reality to the fundamental human emotions, of which there aren't that many.
Right.
And we all feel them. We all have access to those fundamental emotions. So there's something into that, what that language of the collective subconscious is. Again, and we're just speculating here. We're riffing here, folks, but I want to know.
Yeah, I want to know.
I just want to know.
Yeah.
Because I think the more I know about myself, the more I want to know about us.
Yes.
So I am not separate from us, even though that may be my daily experience. There's, as Ken Wilber says, there's me on the inside of my face, and there's everything outside of my face. But that may be an artificial barrier in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
There's all kinds of stuff.
the
I feel like.
accountability practice has power, because when I become aware of myself and my boundaries, then I have the awareness of how to, or that I can now transcend those boundaries. I do not have to choose to be isolated in who I am. I actually can now let love in, I can let intimacy in, I can be vulnerable to the world out there, which is in fact just another version of me.
Somehow, some way.
And then that's how fear drops, because if I'm intimately connected with what's out there, then I'm not an enemy of what's out there, and that what's out there is not designed to hurt me, but it's actually maybe designed to benefit me.
Mm-hmm.
And our trauma, the trauma that I went through as a kid, put me in that defensive position that you were describing a few minutes ago, where I prefer to stay there because it's kept me safe,
Mm-hmm.
but it also keeps me disconnected.
Yes.
From these greater possibilities.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's what the thesis, part of the thesis of my book is, that's what's keeping us all disconnected. That's why we continue to have wars and other outbursts of violence, which are just collective cries for love, cries of humanity to love itself.
Mm-hmm.
The way we can learn to do individually first. It's where I got to do it. Starts at home. If I learn to love myself unconditionally, then I step into the possibility of loving everybody unconditionally.
Yes. Wow.
So I was thinking about, we're recording this on a Friday, and 2 days from now is Mother's Day. And I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about mothers.
Oh. Oops.
Okay, we don't have to.
No, it's perfect. Perfect.
Well,
Wow.
I'll start by saying that one of the things that was a challenge for me as I went back to the memorial service, and I was delivering a eulogy in concert with my brother John, was a great name, who's the next youngest after me, and we were both struggling with, what are we going to say about our mom? Because we didn't feel the same closeness and power that we felt with our dad.
Right.
And there were times when I just preferred to not even be around her.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, okay, as John would say, well, yeah, we're doing a eulogy, which comes from the two Greek words meaning good words.
Right.
So
yeah, damn.
so we're not there to do a therapy session.
Right.
On the other hand, I'm not there to make it up or to dissemble either.
Right.
But what I found interesting is that, again, in talking to my siblings, that dynamic was pretty universal among all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking to a couple of our cousins were there, cousins who are the children of my mom's sister, my mom's older sister.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom's mom died when she was 5, and so my aunt was 7. And we were talking about these dynamics with our cousins, and one of my cousins said something I had never heard before. They said that when they were struggling with our aunt would say to them, I didn't have a mother, so I'm making this up. And I thought,
Oh,
well,
wow.
that's really interesting. And so whatever the traumas were that these women experienced as little girls and growing up in a family where their mother disappeared in death when they were at those young ages of 5 and 7, how could that not get passed on?
Right.
Particularly as they both married fairly young. I was the oldest in my parents' family, and they were 21 when I was born. I mean, 21.
Yeah.
So you're barely getting going as an adult at that age.
Yeah.
And so there was never any time for the work that we get to do now. There was never any time for the therapies, or there was probably never any recognition that that would be something helpful.
Right.
And so the thing I acknowledged about my mom is that she went into this work and she just kept at it through all of the obstacles and the torments and the doubts. I mean, she must have had many. And who did she talk to about it? I don't know. She talked to my dad. I don't think so. I don't think he talked to her. They were just drinking. They were drinking buddies.
Mm-hmm.
And so that what I was thinking about, and the reason I wanted to check with you on this, is I think that every human being comes into the world expecting in some kind of way mothering. And this goes to our love equals exercise that we talk about. We're expecting, not because we were given a menu or anything at the entrance to life, but we're designed to be nurtured.
Right.
We're utterly helpless when we come into the universe or into the world as infants, and so we
Right.
have to be nurtured, and we have to be raised. And so that's usually the responsibility of the mother and not the father in most cultures. And so what kind of mothering we got a real direct impact on what kind of adult life we're going to live.
Exactly. Just
again, no blame,
down.
no judgment. That's
No,
the
no,
hardest part,
no.
is to not blame. It's like, you
No.
know, that's why when I heard that line, I didn't have a mother myself. It's like, yeah. So
Yeah.
what could you bring to being a mother?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you were talking about when we come in, there's this expectation of nurturing. We I don't know if it was Dan Siegel who wrote, I forget the name of the book, it'll come to me, but he talks about children having mirror neurons.
Right.
And they look to see themselves, and then it's mirrored back. And that's how they know what they know. That's the only way they know. And it's part of the physiology that we come in with as babies, and the nurturing is vital. Connection. And Siegel wrote a book about attachment disorders, and the healthy attachment, and then there's, I don't know, 3, I don't know all of them, avoidant attachment, disoriented, something else. And those attachment disorders determine how we connect to ourselves and the people around us, and very significant in the recovery field of, you know, in and out of relationships, or struggling in relationships, or poor self-image, or inability to set healthy boundaries, that kind of stuff. So
yeah. And then there's the guidance. I was thinking about when you were talking, we took a trip to the Detroit Zoo while we were there, and we saw several intergenerational groupings of adults and little animals, and you could just see that the little ones were utterly following around, in this case particularly the mothers, although the father was there, and you could just see the imitating going on. Just the way they walked, the way they looked around, and so we know that's a universal trait.
yes.
In the animal kingdom of which we are part, that we we have no choice but to mirror,
Right.
to use that mirroring, and then utterly imitate without any kind of discrimination about it.
And that gets not logged into the subconscious, and it informs our survival, how we survive, and therein lies family of origin dysfunction, childhood trauma. In the 12-step group, adult children of alcoholics, they have the 14 traits of somebody raised in a dysfunctional home. Fear of authority figures, angry when criticized, addicted to excitement,
People
confused love
pleasing.
confused love and pity, and become alcoholics or codependents. And it's
Or
just in
marry them.
alignment with that, what happened to us as children.
Right.
And so sad to say, mostly from mothers. I understand now, as a father, I had the capacity to nurture my children from birth on. In my mind, it was like, wait till they throw something, then I'll jump in. You know, it's like when they start throwing things, then I'll come in and participate. That's when I know that was my conditioning. I nurture my grandson in a masculine body. His mother nurtures him from a feminine body, and it's completely different. And that child has now seen both. He knows what it feels like to be loved by a man. He knows what it feels like to be loved by a woman, myself and the other people in his life too, his aunt, his grandmothers, and his other grandfathers, and cousins, and is vital to their capacity to be healthy human beings, is to know both. I was in a night work group where we met with a bunch of men one day a month at night, and we played drums and around a fire and then talked. One person would get up and talk, and a young man got up and said, I don't know how to love a woman until I feel what it feels like to be loved by a man. And that just blew me out of the water. It's like, what did you just say? And it's like my life made sense. Is how would I know to love a woman from the masculine if I've never felt love from a masculine, or nurturing from a... Now, I'm not saying my dad didn't love me, because in his way, he loved me. And he was conditioned through the Depression era and everything that was going on, Second World War, and his complicated post-traumatic stress disorder was a main ingredient in his energy that he held, that I sucked up. Okay, yeah. And if he would have had what we have, they didn't have that. They didn't have a place to go and talk, and just to be talking, or a place to focus on trauma. They were told to buck up, get over it, quit your whining, and get on with it. You got something to do here. Shut up. And we have that privilege. It's not a privilege. It's we have access to information that I know my parents did not have access to, and I am grateful for that, and grateful for them for doing what they did the best way they knew how.
It's interesting. What I heard you say is that as a little boy, as a little infant, I look to both of these people for nurturing. I mean, I'm assuming that what I'm getting is nurturing.
Yes.
Regardless of the actual delivery and the actual intention of my mom and my dad, I'm coming into the world, and I'm utterly helpless, and they're both contributing to my sense of well-being.
Yes.
Or lack thereof.
Thereof.
Yeah, I didn't think of that in that way till you just said that the father and the mother are experienced by the infant as nurturer.
Right.
And so if there is no father, then the child's just not going to have that, Or if the
Right.
mother dies and the father doesn't remarry, then you're not going to have the maternal
Right.
nurturing. It's like, it was interesting when you were talking about that with respect to Solomon, getting both of those energies in a relatively, you didn't use the word, but in a relatively balanced way, in the sense that he's living in them on a continuous basis.
Mhm.
So he gets that experience as a continuity and not
Right.
as something that's occasional.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. See, what I realized was that I was the second child. I had an older brother who was 18 months old, running around with shitty diapers, and my mom had me. She also was dealing with my dad, who was an alcoholic, drunk, violent, never knew when he was going to fly off the handle. So it's like, and she had resentment that I was supposed to be the girl, I was supposed to be the one that was her savior. She finally got a woman on her side, and I turned out to have a penis, and oh my God, it's like this, and all that resentment and stuff and all of that was not her fault. And she did the best she could. And I'm working through it. I can even say I'm grateful for it.
Sure.
Oh my God, because where I am now, based on what I've went through, and I'm in the place I'm at now, I wasn't a victim. I on a spiritual, divine level, created this situation, and whether it's karma, it doesn't matter to me anymore. That I chose to go through this so that you and I can have this conversation and explore things that our parents didn't even have an inkling they could talk about, because they had to pay the bills, they had to make sure they had a job, they had to like find a house, food, shelter, clothing, and they did that well. I'm still alive, so they did that well, so that we can now explore and evolve. And neither one of us would have been able to do that unless they struggled, did what they did to provide us this life that we have and information that we have. Yeah.
Would you be willing to talk a little bit more about that? So somebody who's listening to this for the first time or the first few times might really be tripped up by the notion that I'm grateful for my traumatic upbringing.
Oh, yeah. It's like, I first was introduced to
because
this.
my traumatic upbringing pisses me off.
Right. Which rightly so. I mean, it's not that I wasn't angry about it and
Right.
went through the feeling. Okay. So my first exposure to this was when I first went into 12-step, and I was mostly in adult children of alcoholics, but I went to AA meetings, and I heard them say, I am a grateful alcoholic. That made no sense to me whatsoever. It's just like, are you kidding me? How do you come up with that stupid shit? It's like, I'm here like trying to not be all this, and then you're telling me you're grateful. I don't know. Okay. So it took me a while just to discover that if it weren't for the alcohol, I wouldn't be sitting in a room of expansion, of healing. I don't know what would have happened to me, but I would not have been there. And in our conversation right here, we're at a level of, we're in this conversation. And we're in this conversation because I dealt with my family of origin dysfunction and childhood trauma. And it's given me a life I never knew was possible. It's like everybody has a struggle, there's conflict. And the traditional idea of conflict resolution is to stop the conflict. Well, no, what I've come to discover is in the conflict comes resolution, which is clarity. So without this angst, right now I'd be sitting in Winnebago fishing, and nothing wrong with this. And I'm like, that would be cool too. Driving around, catching trout and going deep sea fishing and whatever I'd be doing, which is okay. But I like where I'm at. I like being this catalyst. I like being this person who has information and works on disseminating it. So that people can join our conversation, at least just join our conversation, and not be stuck in what ifs, how come, why fors, if I had only, all those expectations that I had before I got into recovery. Self-deprecating, other deprecating language, or seeking my life through vicariously, either through, and now I'm going to piss people off, I'm sorry, but I did this vicariously through football, baseball, basketball, and those guys get enormous amounts of money because they show us what it feels like to be alive and in the zone. Wow. No, I want to be alive and in the zone, whether I'm playing basketball or not. That's where I want to be. And the more people that are here with me, the more fun it is, and the more exciting, and the more we get to explore things now that we're like curious about, like, ooh, I wonder how this works in groupthink or group feeling, or whoa, yeah, let's do that.
Well, on top of that, I was just thinking as you were sharing about the impact of this shift in our general outlook and attitude on our physical health.
Yes.
We have the new
God.
gut check meeting that's been meeting now for a month and a half or so. And when you said about gratitude, what jumped in my mind also, when I practice gratitude is a stress reducing activity. And anything that I can do to reduce stress, in psychological, psychospiritual stress that is generated by myself, anything I can do to reduce that will increase the serenity of my body, increase the flow of everything that's supposed to just flow through easily and naturally without any kind of obstruction, blood, nerves, lymphs, all the energy of my body is impacted the higher my stress level is.
Yes.
And so the lower my stress level is, the healthier I'm going to be as a fundamental condition. So I was thinking, gratitude is not just for my soul, but it's also for my body.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And the chemicals that are created through like being hyper vigilant, which is a result of family of origin dysfunction, cortisoids are all immune suppressors. And the serotonin, or I don't know what they are, norepinephrine, dopamine, all the feel-good drugs are enhancers of our immune system.
Right.
And it's just like we work the way we're designed, which is to heal. I mean, everybody knows you get a cut, you clean it up, put a Band-Aid on it, and pretty soon you don't even see it. It's healed by itself. How'd that work? The body knows how to heal. Well, if it can heal a cut, a laceration in my skin, and then the skin looks like it never had it, what about intestinal stuff? What about cancer? What about diabetes? What about, I don't know. I'm not advocating we got the cure here. Don't get me wrong. Check with your doctor, all that stuff. And let's explore this. Let's talk about this. Let's see if we can find some demonstration of the correlation between joy and healthy. Absolutely.
Versus the opposite.
Yes.
And how many people do we work with who are dealing with the effects of childhood trauma, or which has been allowed to fester over years and years and years, so that the blockages, the emotional blockages have to impact the body. Now, how many people do we work with who have chronic diseases of one kind or another?
Correct. Yeah.
And so, if these correlate, which I say they do, it's my body's experience is these things absolutely correlate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then the reverse correlates, the healing correlates. Mm-hmm. The application of in our work of intention correlates.
Yes.
So I intend to create a world of joy, peace, freedom, and community. Is an intention I set for myself 3 or 4 years ago. And that's my general experience. So I intend to create a world of physical vitality.
There you go.
Will have the same impact
Yeah.
as those other intentions. They have the same power, because I'm reorienting my mind. I'm bringing my mind into alignment with what I say I want.
Yes.
And why would that be any different for my body? I don't know, but I want to find out. So
Yes.
these now I'm starting to set intentions around my physical health with the expectation that something's going to happen.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I am a 2-time cancer survivor.
Right.
My liver was a mess before I quit. It's last time somebody checked, the doctor actually said, "You got a liver of a 33-year-old." I said, "Oh, cool.
Better give it back.
I hope he doesn't drink." It's like a healthy 33-year-old. And it, yeah. So,
I had lunch today with a recovering alcoholic who's been dealing with brain cancer,
oh my God.
and his perspective is one of the most amazingly spiritually healthy perspectives I've ever encountered in somebody struggling with something that's, potentially death dealing.
Mm-hmm.
And he said at some point, it was about 12 years ago, he said, my drinking was so out of control that the only thing I could do is I literally got down on my hands and knees and I said, "God, please, please remove this scourge."
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I literally felt something pass through my body.
Yep.
And after that, I had no more desire to drink. And he said, if I can have that experience of the divine health, brain cancer is nothing compared to that.
Correct. Yeah.
Now, again, somebody hearing this for the first time might think that's a bit woo-woo or delusional, whatever word you want. I'm looking at this guy. I'm sitting next to him in the restaurant, and he looks as healthy as anybody his age could possibly look.
Correct.
Now, I can't see inside his skull, but he just had a CAT scan last week, and the tumors are still quiescent.
Mm-hmm. Meaning non-intrusive.
They're not growing. They're not shrinking, and they're not growing. They're just sitting there.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that this guy is the answer, and I can't say that his understanding of who he really is, his understanding of his relationship to his higher power, his fearlessness. I can't say those don't impact
Correct.
his health.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's one of the topics that I see as a society now at least willing to broach is the impact of invisible forces on us, which you might call spiritual, and that we're actually spiritual beings and having this human experience, and that, well, I listened to a guy named Rudolf Steiner who talks about spiritual science, the science of spirituality. And to be brief, the scientific method is demonstratable, and what I'm getting from him is that the spiritual scientific method is demonstratable. And it works in intentional living accountability tree process, because when people identify what they want that they don't have, use the practice of the accountability tree, there's a demonstration that something attitude has shifted, perception has shifted, reactions in certain situations that were patterned that they would do over and over shift. So that's a demonstration that whatever's happening internally in my subconscious, based on my willingness to own the results, like I'm dumb, an alcoholic, and that was the beginning of the end of the alcoholism. And it works on, well, arrogant, entitled, mean, controlling, and needy. Those are character defects that we take to the accountability tree process. Just own them without blame or judgment. Like, I'm mean. Well, of course I'm mean. Look where I came from. Mean works. It keeps people away and people hurt. So yeah, why wouldn't I be mean? And it hurts me. It hurts them. It's destructive. Yes, it's all that. It is not out of alignment with the information that was given to me as an infant, child, teen, 20, 30, 40. So, and it's demonstrable. People see the difference internally, attitude-wise, spiritual-wise, emotionally, more balanced. Not that the struggle goes away, and it's cumulative. It builds, and then I can say I pop out and go, oh, wow, dang. I remember an example of that is, I don't know how many years ago it was, but I looked in the mirror and I just smiled and I thought, wow, I like who I've become. It's like, whoa, whoa. Before it was asshole, dumbass, what the hell's wrong with you, stupid. And this statement popped into my, oh, I like who I've become. And I was smiling at myself. It was like, hey, I gotta go tell somebody this shit works.
Exactly.
So,
well, what I noticed, I've shared this on this podcast before, but I noticed, again, while I was back in Michigan, I had several things would show up that were old critiques, shall we say, mental self-critiques. And I'm like, oh, okay, look, there's a mental self-critique coming up. It's like, what do I want? I was struggling, as I mentioned at the top of the podcast, I was struggling with what I was going to say about my mom.
yeah.
And I'm sitting down Friday night to write a eulogy that I have to deliver tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. And I just knew, as I was struggling, I've been struggling with, I knew I had to do this for a month. So I struggled with that for a month.
Yeah.
And I knew that the right words would eventually show up, and that struggling with it was part of it. It's like, I'm engaged with myself rather than saying what's wrong with you, and that, that dialogue that you were just mentioning that you have also experienced. I was like, I'm willing to hang with this uncertainty. I'm willing to hang with this fear that I won't say the right things, fear that I'll look stupid, fear that I'll say something that will piss someone off, all those things. And when the time came to sit down and put my thoughts together, it just flowed. It not only flowed out of the tips of my fingers, but when I was complete, only when I was complete, or I thought I was complete, an hour later, the way to finish it showed up.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh gosh, yes, this gets it. This says what I want to say in a story. And it was great. And so that's, I don't know that I could have done that without this process, without learning to allow myself to be the way I am. I'm agitated. I'm in doubt. I'm confused, whatever. Okay, nothing wrong. What do I want? Well, I want to be at ease with myself. I give myself permission to be in this.
Yeah.
And that that permitted me to allow the process to flow the way it is going to flow, and eventually end up in the place that I was expecting could end up, without having any clue what it would actually be specifically, what I was going to say, until 12 hours before. There it is. And that's this process for me, that my mind no longer, that even when my mind goes to self-criticism, immediately after that, something else shows up and says, well, no, I don't want this.
Right.
I mean, it's like amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
You couldn't pay a brain surgeon $1 million to get that.
Right. Yep. Yep. No,
Or you couldn't pay most therapists $1 million to get there.
exactly.
So, yeah, so this process has power. And so I'm grateful. And
Yeah.
that's what I said. That's what I said in my eulogy. I said, I'm grateful that this apple did not fall far from the tree of my mom or my dad.
Right. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Because they were alcoholics and they were great people.
Yeah.
And they did their best they could with what they had, and they had many gifts.
Hmm.
And they had many obstacles, and so we were talking earlier about the intergenerational, they didn't come from 100% loving and nurturing homes and then
Right.
turn out to be alcoholics who were into self-hatred and self-denial. No, that my grandparents had that stuff going on too.
Yeah.
And probably my great-grandparents and probably their parents.
And yeah.
And on back to the Garden of Eden.
And then somebody what apple? Okay.
Well, John, as always, I appreciate our time together, and let's see if there's any last minute words that you have to bring us to a close here.
The eulogy means good word, right?
Right.
Yeah, good words. And they're appropriate, so no matter what happened, yeah. And I gave my mother's eulogy, and I knew she didn't need it. She was someplace, I don't know where she was, but she didn't need it. But the people that were there really enjoyed me talking my mom up, and it was really cool. Really cool. I feel I don't know what the feeling is. Centered, solid, whole, and showed integrity. Yeah, it's really good. So thank you, Marty.
Beautiful. Thank you, John.
Mhm.
See you at the next one.
You got it.